Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Sunday, May 17th, 2026. Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 and 6 is what I'm going to read now. Conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. Let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. So it's Sunday, Jesus Day, up on the Subjective Professor podcast, and I have some good news. I was able to score adjunct position at a local school. I just need another one, and maybe it'll uh, make up for what I'm making now because adjunct spots are just basically part-time. So I need another one. So hopefully I'll be able to find another one since I'm not going to be teaching at the middle school any longer. Okay, so let's just get to it. Just my little announcement. So, if you've been following the news, President Trump of the United States met with President Xi of China this past week. Now, normally, when you have a summit or a meeting like this, there is a lot of preparation. The staff of each president does all this research, they plan everything out, and then they meet. You have to know what the advantages are, disadvantages, strengths, weaknesses, etiquette, bargaining chips, goals, fears of either side, so you can come up with a strategy for discussion, dialogue, what to say, what not to say, how to say what you need to say in a way that will not insult the other side. You know, all of these different things, especially when you have two people from different cultural backgrounds coming together, you need to have all of this kind of preparation. It is said that Trump did nothing to prepare for this discussion, which is kind of par for the course. The people who go and try to negotiate and discuss things with Iran, with probably the Ukraine, yeah, there's no preparation either. They're just demands that are being made known to the other side. And so, why didn't Trump do any kind of preparation? Because Trump believes that he is in the position of strength, that he can coerce and threaten and bully and get whatever he wants. Now, we all know that negotiation is a kind of chess. You're, exercising a lot of strategy to hide your own ignorance about certain things while trying to project confidence. Well, all Trump did was basically announce his own ignorance. And the news here in the West does not talk about these kinds of things. Instead, they try to show that Trump knows what he's doing. Uh, Xi didn't even meet Trump at the airport, which is what you would normally do if a country respects you. So Xi met Putin at the airport, but you don't see that happening here with Trump. And I suspected there would be some kind of hints at the dissatisfaction that China has with the United States. In other words, the Western media, when they talk about this meeting, they're putting lipstick on a pig. And if you're unfamiliar with that expression, you're trying to make pretty something that is kind of ugly. And you might think that pigs are extremely attractive, but generally pigs are, well, they're pigs. And so trying to put lipstick on a pig, you're basically trying to make the pig look better than it actually is. Now, Christians cannot be like this. Christians cannot live this way, pretending and faking one's way through life, much in the way that the United States and Donald Trump are doing. Instead, we have to speak with grace. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, in a verse that I read, I'm going to repeat verse 6. It says, "Let your speech always be with grace as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person." So believers have to speak with grace. Now, grace here does not mean speak politely or respectfully or uh, with observing the proper etiquette. Instead, because it's in scripture, when it says speak with grace, it means that we should speak with justice and with honesty, right? So we speak with justice honestly. And so we do it in a way so that it is clearly understood and with an attitude that we are teaching. Now, justice is a theme that I've talked about a lot on Sundays, and so I think by now you're pretty much familiar with it. But justice is the opposite of hypocrisy. And justice is important, right? We speak with justice because it means that we are not being hypocrites. We're not speaking with hypocrisy. We're not being hypocritical. And hypocrisy, as I always explain, is can be simply understood as a double standard. In other words, if I say something is wrong unless I do it, then I'm employing a double standard. Rules for you, not for me. So you have to abide by all these rules, follow all these rules, but I don't have to. So I'm exempting myself from following certain rules. And so to be a hypocrite is to be biased. You're not being fair. You're giving yourself an advantage, and so therefore it is unjust. And as I always say, hypocrisy is the root and source of all injustice in society. Something funny is going on, and so therefore you don't have justice, you have injustice. So whenever you want to, just as an aside, whenever you want to talk about injustice, look for where there are hypocritical laws, and you'll find them, and that will explain the injustice that you are experiencing. Sometimes you have to dig pretty far, but you will always find at the root, at the heart of the matter, some sort of hypocritical law. So speaking with grace means that we have to be fair. It means we have to be just. This means that you don't make demands. You don't try to intimidate or use force. And of course, you cannot lie. But unfortunately, sin has made lying normal, particularly here in the West and the United States. Lying includes speaking from ignorance. That is to say, there's intentional lying. You know something is not true, but you say it. But then there's also the lying from ignorance. You're repeating something that is not true, but you think it's true. Even though you think it's true, because it's not true, it's a lie. And so, and this used to be a prevalent understanding here in the United States. Everyone used to know this, think this, but it has sort of fallen out of the wayside. I didn't know it was a lie. And so people try to skirt or avoid responsibility in the fallout from repeating a lie. But that's only because of the problems we have, the money problems we have here in the United States. Everyone is trying to avoid responsibility, but still, speak from ignorance. But anyway, so uh, to say a lie intentionally or unintentionally is to make yourself a liar. So, in order to know what is just, what is not a lie, you have to study and know what the truth is. You have to know what the law is. You have to have knowledge and understanding of the way things are. And unfortunately, the leadership and the people living in the West, sorry, ambulance going by, um, people in the West, they have none of these things. There's no desire to learn. There's no sense of urgency in needing to know what the truth might be. And so instead of education, we have censorship. Uh, because of the past wealth of the United States, 100 years ago, developed 100 years ago, an obscene amount of wealth that was developed 100 years ago, America has become lazy and therefore ignorant. Now, I've talked about this elsewhere before, but because with all that money floating around, you can pretty much bribe anybody. And so a lot of the billionaires from the heyday of the United States, of small government, they bribed politicians to write laws to protect their businesses and to prevent competition. And so this is what made people in America lazy. And a result of this laziness, that thinking that they can buy anything that they want, including supremacy in the world, has made us ignorant. So the United States suffers from laziness and ignorance. They go hand in hand. And this is why, instead of learning, we censor. Instead of trying to debate and discuss things, we just label things as hate speech and don't even think about it, right? We're not allowed to think about it. And this makes ignorance normal. It makes lying normal. That's what we do here in America. We lie and we live in ignorance. Now, the Apostle Paul tells the believers to speak with grace with the outsider in verse 5. It says, conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. So, who's the outsider? Is it a person from a different country? Is it a person of a different religion, a different culture? The reality is that everyone is an outsider to yourself. When the rubber meets the road, when you get right down to it, everyone is an outsider to me. Even before you get married, that person was an outsider. And then because you spoke with grace, hopefully, that person is now your spouse. But if you don't do it well, you're hiding things, well, that person is still an outsider, right? And ultimately, although we like to think ideally that even in a marriage, uh, two people are no longer outsiders to each other, no, the reality is that, you know, that person's an outsider. In other words, we have to speak with grace with everyone, our parents, our children, our friends, our coworkers, strangers, and yes, with our enemies. We must speak with grace, that is justice, without hypocrisy, with our enemies. But because sin has made us ignorant, hypocrites, we make it impossible to speak with anyone with grace. Right? So our sin, our problem, not just certain leaders of the world, but our problem is sin. And because of sin, we can't speak with grace. People just can't do it. And because we can't speak with grace, sinners cannot speak with grace, we have problems. We have lots of problems. And continually making problems, well, that's a sign of a lack of faith. And so we don't have blessing, but instead we have condemnation from God. In other words, too many people sort of gloss over the fact that we live in ignorance. And so they assume that whatever it is you know already is given to you from God. I've heard that so many times, and it makes me go nuts every time I hear it. But nevertheless, that is what a lot of people believe, that there's nothing more that you really need to learn, especially that will change your mind, change your values, change your likes and dislikes. And so they just simply continue to live in ignorance. Whatever I liked before is still good, except now I get to say, God, it's from God. This calling is from God. This desire is from God. And so clearly, not having faith means that you have condemnation. You continue to live in ignorance. Now, believers live by faith, and by faith, we can learn and grow in truth. Learning more and more lets us realize just how ignorant we are. And so, the more we learn and understand, the more we are humble. We humiliate ourselves because we realize, there's too much that we don't know. And so, the more that we learn, the more we try to learn more because we realize just how ignorant we are. Now, a lot of people in the East, there are even sayings like this. More recently in the West, we have the Dunning-Kruger effect. But in the East, this is almost a cliche. It's what do they call that? A truism. Everyone kind of knows it. So all of the etiquette in the world is not more important, or nor does it make it irrelevant, the knowledge of truth and true justice. We have to know truth and we have to know true justice. And that's more important than even understanding etiquette. The more we have true knowledge, the more we see our own hypocrisy. So not growing in our faith, not understanding the Word of God more deeply means that we remain ignorant even of our own hypocrisy. We don't realize that we're hypocrites. I was talking to a bunch of students and I said, I talked about hypocrisy and they kind of looked at me like, yeah, who are the hypocrites? Well, we're all hypocrites, all of us. And until you discover your own hypocrisy, yeah, you are deep in your own hypocrisy. We are so ignorant because of sin that we can't even see our own hypocrisy. And as we continue to grow in our knowledge and understanding, we realize that censorship protects ignorance, it protects lies. Censorship protects the very thing we don't like. Like we would want hate speech to disappear, but by censoring, we have even more hate speech. And so, in this way, we realize that the use of threat and force and violence, coercion, is projected ignorance. Um, so, instead of projecting our ignorance by trying to ban and censor other people, we commit to learning more. The more knowledge we have, the more we understand that the use of force, coercion, yes, war does not persuade very many people, if any. In other words, bombing of people does not produce peace. So we have to not do it. We have to avoid it. Imagine that you're in an argument and discussion and the person still doesn't agree with you. Are you going to say, agree with me or I'll punch you in the face? That generally does not work. Instead, when you use violence, the people that you're trying to persuade, they double down. And we see that going on in Iran. Colonel McGregor talked about how this happened in Iraq during World War II. You can bomb the people, but it doesn't change anything. It's sort of like torture. You don't get good information by torturing people, and so you shouldn't do it. It's not beneficial. When we live in truth, every conversation is an opportunity to speak truth. And as I said, the outsider is everybody. So as every time we have a conversation, it's an opportunity to speak truth. And Trump talking to Xi, that was an opportunity for truth, but we've we've lost it. America has become so weak, and China is in such a better position overall speaking that China now even issues demands to America. Like, you will not speak about Taiwan. You will not speak about domestic demographics in China. You will not talk about these things. In other words, China now is dictating to the United States what they can and cannot say. I don't even think they did this in the first Trump term, but this is opportunity lost because of the injustice, because of the gross violations of the Constitution here in the United States. That opportunity is lost. The opportunity to share justice, the opportunity to share life, it's lost. It's gone. By faith, we have to understand that truth is peace. Truth is grace. So we're not really so concerned about our opinion and our desires. Instead, we're always looking for ways to improve. What is peace? What is truth? How can I have more of it? That's what we're always looking for. And people who live in ignorance, they ignore the truth. Therefore, they continue to live in a world of violence. To reread verse 6, it says, let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. Now, individualism is really big on this channel and for me. I always say nearly every Sunday that each of us are individuals. And so for me to say, do this, will not be very helpful for the vast majority of us. Each of us are different. Our faith is different. Where we are in our life is different. Everyone we talk to, most of the people, they're going to be different. And why we talk to them, the situation, the circumstance, the context, the goal of that conversation is different for every person. So not only are each of us different, and so therefore the situations we encounter are going to be different, but everyone we talk to, they're different as well. So instead of having a one size fits all, everyone just do this and we're okay, we need to understand the situations. We need to know who we are in that situation and then we act in the correct way. As the people of God, we cannot be the loudest voice of ignorance, which is kind of what we are now. Instead, we have to be the source of wisdom and peace. Uh, there's a new mosque, Islam place of prayer and religion, going up in the neighborhood right next to mine. And a lot of people are going crazy. They're like, "Oh, we can't let this mosque in our town. It'll be so horrible." And someone I work with, but people in my church, they also raised this issue. And I asked them, what really is the problem? Is it the fact that they're Muslims? That's the problem? No, that's not the problem. What is the core problem here? The core problem is justice. Justice is the problem. And just so you know, and what I said this morning to sort of say as a comparison, it's imperfect comparison, nevertheless appropriate. But our church, my church, the church where I'm a pastor, was newly built some 40 years ago. But when it was proposed to be built, in other words, we weren't buying a building, we were buying an empty lot. And my father, he had plans to build a church here. And so when that became known, everyone in the township, everyone, I'm talking everyone, was against it. Okay. And they had a township meeting to discuss it and to vote whether or not the building permit should be given a go ahead or not. And my father, and this is a lesson that I learned, another lesson I learned from him when I was younger. He went alone to the township meeting. Is what he said to everyone in my church. Everyone in my church said, "Oh, we'll go with you for moral support." And he says, "No, no, no, no. If they see a whole bunch of Asians showing up at this meeting, man, all those people are even more be solidified against us. No, I will go alone." And so he went alone, and I remember we were at my house and uh, just kind of talking to each other, but praying for a successful meeting. And so when he finally came back, he told us what went down. I won't go into detail here, but basically he said that the church needs to be built so that he can teach the Korean people the law. And that pretty much persuaded a lot of people. And so we got the green light. And so this church was built 40 years ago, about 40 years ago. And so basically, the case is that although there might have been objection racially, perhaps religiously, right, because the neighborhood was predominantly Jewish at the time, maybe that was the issue. But the real thing is justice. If we follow the law, then who cares? And these days, people drive up and down the busy road in front of our church, and no one notices that it's a Korean church that's sitting right here in the middle of their township. No one even sees it. No one cares anymore. And so that's the case that I made this morning. Look, why are people so upset about the mosque? If the law is kept, if the law is followed, if justice is prioritized, then who cares? Before the United States started launching wars left and right in the Middle East, people were basically like most of Islam was becoming secularized. People were not fanatically Muslim. Of course, you always are going to have true believers, but as a society as a whole, it was becoming modernized. It wasn't radicalized Islam. But once you started dropping bombs over there, then yeah, radical Islam gained power because you hate the people who are dropping bombs on you. And so radical Islam was the way that you were going to fight back. So even the discussion of having a mosque built or established here in this neighborhood, it's a justice problem. Make it a justice problem. If everyone who attends the mosque has to follow the rules, then no one will care. And in fact, my whole argument is that the more you have a free society, the more fewer and fewer people will practice Islam faithfully. Just because, in the same way, Christianity is always challenged by freedom. Every religion is challenged that way. And the more freedom that you have, the more that you will seek out true justice, the more you will discover morality, which is something that I keep saying in this channel. And so The real problem here in the United States is that there is no more law. Even the president says he doesn't care about the Constitution. He doesn't care about international law. And so most Americans don't care about international law anymore. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about the laws which gave us the freedom in this country. And that is the problem. And so, what we should be doing more is showing people what's better, showing people that living with freedom in faith is the way to go. And that's how we give evidence to the benefits and the superiority of U.S. values or values of the West. But no, that's not what we're doing. We're just becoming more radical in our ignorance. And so, those of us, if we live by faith, we speak in faith, then that's how we receive the blessing of faith, right? Too many people living in ignorance, doubling down on their ignorance, making rules to protect our ignorance. Yeah, there's no blessing there. But if we understand that what the Apostle Paul is telling us, that we have to speak words of grace by living in true faith, then living that life of faith will lead to blessing. What's the blessing? Well, the first blessing is we can speak words of grace, right? We can speak words with grace instead of creating problems, animosity, hatred, speaking words of ignorance. We can teach people what the truth is. We can teach people what peace is. We can teach people what the grace of God is. And so, being able to speak words of grace is a testimony of faith. So, not only do we have the blessing of being able to speak words of grace through faith, but we also have, therefore, wrapped up in it as well, our testimony of faith. And that testimony of faith, that faith, gives us peace in our hearts. It gives us peace with outsiders, everybody, and it gives us peace with God. And this peace with God is salvation. Look, I gave an example this morning, and maybe it might sound kind of weird and inappropriate, but um, I've had conversations with Muslims, and I had conversations with Muslim students in the doctoral program when I was down at that university. And people were wowed by what I said, which was basically straight up Christian teaching, and they were wowed. That's what we want. We want people to see just how awesome the gospel message of Jesus Christ is. But we got to understand it. We got to practice it. We got to live it. And then in so doing, we create peace. We create um, peace and harmony with all outsiders. And I pray and I hope that you guys understand this, that you may also live by faith, trying to grow and increase our knowledge and understanding of the Word of God and seek justice, speak justice, and foster justice everywhere we go. I hope this is a blessing for you and I hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll talk to you next time.